So in our previous talks, we looked at, or attempted to look at, Joseph the humble, Joseph the hero, and Joseph the hope of our times. And so looking at Joseph again as someone who is humble is someone that's away from the world, kind of perhaps marginalized, someone who is marked by meekness and by modesty and behavior, or one's attitude or spirit, someone who's not arrogant or prideful. And Joseph, we recognize Joseph to be the ruling king of Israel, Judah, but a giant nation has come by over the Mediterranean and usurped that from him, put in a puppet government. And it's interesting, if he really wanted to, maybe he could have seized power or something. After all, there's another group of religious people out there called the Zealots, who he said, hey, I'm the true leader of Israel, like, come and follow me. And he could have had a big uprising, maybe get 100 guys going over there, charge the Romans, and what happened? They're all dead, slaughtered. And that's what happens when we take things in our own hands sometimes. And that's why we need to pray and discern. And he's thinking, the better way to do this is, God is showing me this path of humility. And what happens? He discerns and he wishes to be open to the coming of the Messiah, and does this heroic act of simply relinquishing all of his rightful patriarchal heritage and the kingship, and decides to perhaps pray with or be a part of this group, maybe with the Essenes or from a distance, or perhaps just having a marriage with Mary, Our Lady, who might again have been influenced perhaps by this group of celibates. And so it's very interesting, kind of this extra speculation of why, again, the two people who were vowed to virginity married each other in the first place, other than simply dedicating themselves totally to the Lord and to his will. And in those things, we sort of don't imitate them in that, but when we look at that gift, that he surrenders himself, and the Father gives him the eternal Son as his own. And to look at this issue of Joseph the hero, and what makes for a hero? We would think it's someone who endures hardships, someone that we admire, someone that we want to be like in our life. And Joseph is there, and he's told by God things that are just sort of contrary to his whole way of looking at things. So going to Egypt wouldn't even make any sense to flee from Herod. And yet he does. And by doing that, what happens? According to tradition with a small t, it says that's when the idols were destroyed. We kind of have sort of a theme like that, St. Joseph, terror of demons, and the litany. And it's from Isaiah as well, like, I will go into Egypt and the idols will bow down before me. And that's Joseph takes Jesus, he brings to Egypt, and we said the idols are smashed, or they come tumbling down before the Holy Family. Whether or not that really happened, the truth we can get from that is, I need idols smashed in my life. I need St. Joseph to come into my life, to come right into my heart, and to break those things that are stopping me from growing in holiness. The idol of my pride, of my human weaknesses, of my sarcasm, of my addictions, of my fill in the blanks, whatever. I need to get rid of all those idols in my life and to help uproot them. And what does Joseph do when I ask him to come into my heart? Who does he come? He comes charging in, and he brings with him Jesus and Mary. The two people can get the job done no time flat. But we have to be open to those graces and recognize what are those idols that I need to smash. Because oftentimes, particularly in our 2021 world, what do? We spend half the time criticizing other people, talking about other people, canceling other people, having social networks and stuff like that. And do we really take time to be silent? Do we really take time to cultivate our own hearts, to see what's going on in here? What needs to change within me? How do I treat other people? And what are my responsibilities? And I look at my own vocational discernment. Who am I? My father, my husband, I'm a priest. To look at these issues and how am I living out my vocation well? Because ultimately, I'll be judged on my vocation. I'm not going to be judged on whether I'm a great tennis player or not. I'm going to be judged for me whether or not I've offered the holy sacrifice of the Mass every day. Have I been a good example to other people? Have I really had a Christ-like heart to others? What is God calling me to do? And again, being a husband, well, how is God going to judge you? Is it that I work hard, really hard every day, and I need my own quiet time? It's okay, we all need our own quiet time, but like, is your quiet time, your downtime, is that 15 or 20 minutes? Or is that like 2 or 3 hours? Like, oh, I got to check all these emails, or I got to play all these video games, or I got to do this and stuff like that. Yeah, but this is all my downtime. Yeah, but what about your kids over here? Your wife that has the kids all day and stuff like that. And it says, what does Joseph do? I'm always emptying myself. This kenotic activity, kenosis, is this self-emptying that Jesus sees every day in the life of his father, St. Joseph, giving everything, waking up early, going to work, taking care of the needs of others, an imaginative way of praying. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph are before you. They're at the dinner table, and it's supper time, and then a knock on the door comes by, and they open up, and then there's someone out here, and someone who's poor and begging for food. And do you have any food for us? And like Joseph kind of looks and he, they get some bread on the table and stuff like that. So there's bread for his wife, and there's some bread for his kid over here. And then he's just like, we're poor too. And what does he do? I think he just takes his bread for his own dish and stuff like that, and just gives it to this poor man. Or maybe breaks it in half and gives him something and stuff like that. And he goes without. It's like, yeah, but I just worked hard all day. Like, from morning to night at the carpenter shop, and I still have to keep giving of myself. It's like, bingo, that's why God made you a man, to keep giving of yourself all the time, to spend yourself for the other. And then the next day, Joseph is like, oh, I got to work harder. I got to earn extra bread, so to speak, and money for my wife and my kid, and for myself, that I could have something, and then for the poor. And then I begin to think of how we're going to help out the poor. And again, the child, Jesus sees this. He sees his parents doing positive, good things and actions for the poor. And that's always part of our own discernment. How do we bring the poor into our lives? There's lots of different ways to do that. And it's what you and your wife discuss. You can discuss these things before you get married and stuff like that. Now it's all Monday morning quarterbacking. We can still figure some things out and say things like, okay, do we tithe 10%? Oh, I can't do that. That's ridiculous. Yeah, but I mean, really, that's an act of trust in God. Yeah, but I got to get all these bills to pay, the mortgage and my credit cards, so I can't tithe anything. It's like I'm the poor. They should give money to me. Actually, the government does do that. It's called checks. And then this realization that, in COVID, that when COVID began, it was not so, like in March of 2020 and stuff like that. Everything was shut down. There were some people who were just like, oh, the friars are going to starve and stuff like that. And they thought like all the friars would be dead by like April or something. Like so because they're not going to go begging anymore. And so people came by and they began to drop off food. People were, this is true, they were like tithing their toilet paper. And I know that they were tithing their toilet paper because, toilet paper, that was really a commodity back then. It's like, we can't live without toilet paper. It's like, oh my God, what did St. Francis do without toilet paper? No, just toilet paper. And then it's just like, instead of getting a package of like Charmin or something, we got like 2 rolls out of the package inside the plastic bag and stuff like that. Why? Because they were tithing. It's like, okay, I got my toilet paper here, and you had to go in the supermarket with a sharp gun, like, just like, looking at paper towels and toilet paper, and like, I was arguing over these things, like, that's beyond first world problems. Yeah, it's funny, it's because it's kind of nutty. And then it's just like, okay, I have this, well, maybe friars need that and stuff. So someone just took a roll of toilet paper and gave it to us and stuff. And so it's like, it was very, very, beautiful in some ways. And we're looking at that. And so, but how do we tithe? How do we have the resource that we have and to recognize that we're good stewards and that we can give to others? And so, when we look at St. Joseph as a hero, as someone that we admire, someone that we try to imitate, someone who has undergone sufferings and still bore that in his own person and came out doing magnificent things. Another Joseph, Joseph Campbell, is sort of like the myth of the hero. This has to go back to the 1970s and 80s. And then he was a college professor who kind of studied this sort of like hero in mythology and stuff like that. And he realized, looking at Greek heroes and Roman heroes and Norse heroes and whatever, that a hero is someone in the ancient world, anyway, who would be taken from real life, and something happens, and you're kind of drawn into something else bigger than yourself, and then you need a companion on the way to help you to overcome this situation, and you kind of get a talisman or something, some type of a weapon or something that you use to help fight the evil that you're going to encounter, and then you kind of come to the very depths and the dregs of where you're at. Like, you're totally, some people, sometimes we see in myth, they go right down to hell and at the battle of the realm of the dead. What am I talking about? If you've seen the animated show Coco, that's what I'm talking about. Look it up later. Every single movie of great heroism, you see Coco at Pure Heart. It's the same thing. It's crazy. And like, I didn't see it Pure Heart, and then I watched it 2 weeks later. I was like, this is Joseph Campbell all over again. We find in Lord of the Rings, we find in Star Wars, we find in any good movie, and it's in the life of St. Joseph. And he comes. He's just a regular guy, like a carpenter. That's why he's like, or maybe Superman living as Clark Kent, his secret identity and stuff like that, because he's really the king. And then he's like, he's taken out of his world. Why? Because Herod is after the child. And now we move from Joseph the hero to like Joseph the hope of our times. Here's one man who at this point, and I'm saying dramatically because it's just true when we think about it, he's battling the whole Roman Empire. It's one man against the whole Roman Empire. This man, Herod, is hell-bent on killing children. And he's after your son. And you got to fight him. And here's how you do it. That's what he's doing. And he finds a partner to help him. In this case, Our Lady. And he has the talisman to fight with the special weapon, which is Jesus himself. And he takes them, and he goes to where? The land of the dead, Egypt. And then he goes and hiding, and he comes back, and God himself, as the Old Testament reminds us, the Lord himself will fight for you. You have only to be still. God takes care of the problems of evil leaders and stuff like that. It's okay, come back in. You get rid of her. It's called death. Everyone has to deal with this issue. And then he comes back, then he begins life again. Anew, changed from the suffering that he endured. And Joseph is a hero. He's partly with God's plan the whole time. And then what does he do? He plants the seeds for our salvation. He begins to cultivate the youthfulness of our Lord in his own home in a very hidden way. And so here's someone who is completely heroic and uproots everything to follow God's plan. And he's a man of all these virtues, and we can every single virtue, whether it's theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, the cardinal virtues, I'm trying to get into all of them, prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude, certainly a man of courage, and of course this unbounded chastity. Just one virtue quote from the man who can tell us everything, Joseph Pieper, the great German philosopher. Here, the reflection is, I'll try to move it along because it's really bad to quote philosophy after lunch. But here, Pieper reminds us, temperance creates beauty. I have a whole anthology. We could read this all day. But anyway, just one little quote. Temperance creates beauty. The virtue of temperance, that is, that self-mastery, we'll just call it that, because that's what we need today in men's self-mastery. The virtue of temperance as the preserving and defending realization of man's inner order, his own self-mastery. To the virtue of temperance as the preserving and defending realization of man's inner order, his own self, the gift of beauty is particularly coordinated. So Pieper is making the argument that if we have self-mastery, this is coordinated with the gift of beauty. And of course, St. Joseph married to the most beautiful woman in the world. and raise the most beautiful son. Not only is temperance beautiful in itself, it also renders men beautiful. And here he didn't say people, he said men. Temperance, self-mastery renders us as men beautiful. Beauty, however, must here be understood in its original meaning as the glow of the true and the good irradiating from every ordered state of being, that beauty just radiates outside of us, and not in the patent significance of immediate sensual appeal. It's not something that is catching our eyes, but rather something that just radiates. Now, here's the gift of being a priest. Like, and I'm not special. I just think it happens. Like, for instance, beauty. So, a young couple, and here I can think of young couples that I know from Pure in Heart who leave Pure in Heart to get married. It's not a dating service, it just happens that way. And they go and they get married, and then she's pregnant. Okay, and they come back. And I can tell that she's pregnant because in the woman's eye there's a certain glow and a certain blush in her cheeks and stuff like that. But I mean, he knows because they had a pregnancy test and stuff like that. But I tell that to the husband, and he's like, "How did you know that?" I'm like, "I know that because I don't live with her. I saw her before and after. The same thing with my sister-in-law. I can tell when she's. I mean, it's only happened twice. She had 2 sets of twins, so they're good." Get out of purgatory free card. But anyway, so there's 4 years. And so it's like, whenever I saw her, I can tell that she was pregnant. Why? Because of the inner beauty that she has. And just like, again, sort of the chemical change that take place in her body, that, again, you probably wouldn't notice that, you notice in other ways, the morning sickness and things like that, and other things that happen. But it's just like, wow, not seeing her for a couple months and then seeing her, it's just like, I know what's happening. The beauty of temperance has a more spiritual, more austere, more virile aspect, a more manly aspect, people are saying. It is of the essence of this beauty that does not conflict with true virility, true manhood, but rather has an affinity to it. Temperance, as the wellspring and premise of fortitude, or courage, is the virtue of mature manliness. Maybe I could have skipped to that line and finished it. Temperance is the virtue of mature manliness, self-mastery. It's connected to fortitude, and it's that virtue that makes us men, that we can control all those desires, and they say base desires and things like that, all those things that come after us. And just think, now he goes into like the negative aspect. The infantile disorder of intemperance, on the other hand, not only destroys beauty, it also makes man cowardly. Intemperance, more than any other thing, renders man unable and unwilling to take part against the wounding power of evil in the world. So Pieper is telling us that intemperance, a lack of self-mastery, our woundedness, and whatever it is, we all have addictions, whatever those things are that make us fall all the time, it makes us cowards. Intemperance, more than any other thing, renders man unable and unwilling to take to heart all those things against the wounding power of evil in the world. And so, there's lots of evil in the world. How do we stop it? Same way we do anything. We have to work on ourselves first. We have to pray to the Holy Spirit. We have to ask for God's grace. We have to work on the virtues. We have to discipline ourselves, attain self-mastery. And we can't do this on our own. But we have beautiful examples of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph to help us. Otherwise, we're cowards. And isn't that an interesting aspect, like particularly when I help young men discern things, and I see that, no one's perfect. Some people have some things all together. Some people have some things that need to be put back together. And then it's like, as long as I'm stuck on X, my own personal sin, whether that's pornography or drunkenness or take your pick, I really can't discern well. I don't think I have enough. I don't think I'm going to go all the way. I don't know if I should get married. I don't know if I should become a priest because I have to deal with X over here. And it's just like, right. And part of it is we don't have to be completely fixed all the time to go forward in our vocation discernment, but we have to understand that we have to be on the way to seeking God's help, and we also have to trust in God. This is amazing. That God trusts in us more than we trust in Him. How do I know that? St. Joseph. Because God trusted St. Joseph with his most prized possession. Regular guy, just like the rest of us. He believed in St. Joseph that he would do the job. He believes in each and every one of you that you can get the job done. It's faith. That's why you're here. That's what you're here today. That God trusts in you. That you're the hero that He needs in today's world. How do we know this? How is St. Joseph the hope of our times, and how are the rest of you the hope of our times? Well, let's play Hope Bingo. And what I mean by that is, if I erase this whole board, oh, by the way, sorry. The previous two talks were on St. Joseph, his person, what type of person that he is, looking at him as being humble, a hero, the king, Davidic king. And now we're looking at what is his mission. What is St. Joseph for? How does he help us? The hope of our times, the hope for the world. Basically, I could just simply ask you a question. And if I was like in high school, I'd write down all the answers on the board. And I would say, what is the world's biggest problem today? Oh, you can point at me. It's okay. No, okay, fine. Well, you can say, oh, self-mastery, because I already said that. But again, you can say fatherhood, the destruction of family life, abortion, lack of truth, fidelity in one's vocation or life. There's problems in the church. I don't have a good spiritual life. There's problems with fatherhood, with political things. I don't go to political areas, but like in our country, we say a big problem besides a lack of leadership is like we have this immigration crisis. We have this thing on the borders over here. We have this post-COVID world. I think we're post-COVID, it's still pre-COVID. But anyway, it's like, nobody wants to go back to work anymore. I'm over here, I'm working from home. Oh, and my boss calls me back, and it's just like, oh no, I don't want to go back. I'm getting my checks from the government. I'm all sitting here. We can't even work anymore. Everything I just named, St. Joseph is the answer. As I was saying earlier with St. Anthony of Padua or any saint, something in that saint's life makes him or her a special gift to say, hey, I can solve that problem. St. Anthony of Padua, the reason why you can find things is because, depending on how you interpret the story, St. Anthony's breviary, his office book, was lost one day, and the story is that a novice took it. Why a Franciscan was steal from another Franciscan, I don't know. I personally think you can't steal from Franciscans since they don't own anything anyway. But anyway, his book was missing, and so Anthony of Padua prays that the book is restored, and then either one of two things happen. I like the second version. The first version is simply the novice got convulsion of heart, and he said, oh, I took this thing from this great preacher, I got to give it back to him, so he returns the book. Or the other way is that he prayed for the book to return, and his guardian angel took the book wherever it was, lifted it miles away, and put it right back to him. So those are the two stories. But he got the thing back, so he's the patron saint of lost articles. Today I think that St. Anthony of Padua should be the patron saint of lost people. So we should pray, St. Anthony, please come around. Something is lost and needs to be found. Today I pray, St. Anthony, please come around. Someone is lost and needs to be found. Disconcerted family members here. Okay, so back to St. Joseph. What does he do? He's a father. He helps us to restore lost fatherhood. He's also a perfect son because he's obedient to the Father in heaven. We look at married life and family life, an issue that needs lots of help in our days. St. Joseph's right there. Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. He's considering putting Mary aside. Either he's not worthy, he's thinking what's going to happen here, and yet by God, he's told by an angel, do not break this bond. Don't break this covenant, because they're already married. They're just not living together yet. They're legally married. He's up against a whole country that is opposing him. And by a government that wants to destroy children. That's what Herod is doing. And what does he do? He fights against it. Certainly, St. Joseph and Our Lady mourned the death of the Holy Innocents. And that was a sorrow that he took on as if his own kid was killed. Recognize what Herod was doing. And we see this today. It's right in front of us. I mean, we've been fighting this thing for over 40 years. And it's like we've gone nowhere. It's like everything could be washed away next week or something. And we have to pray and fight more than ever. People want to overturn Roe v. Wade, so you have the government doing one thing over here, maybe the Supreme Court might do something else over here. If this happens and that happens the way that we both want it to happen, I call that a civil war. What's going to happen in the next few months? We have to pray. This is on our doorstep. Immigration. St. Joseph was an immigrant. He went to a foreign country and he lived there for probably, we don't know, 5 years, maybe. I think he's like 10 years. Like Jesus is there 10 years old or something. And he's there growing up in Egypt. When we think of like all these issues and problems and that we need to be solved in our lives personally, or again, the scourge of pornography. That's like people freely admit, like 80% of the population now, whatever, a certain age, like 18 to 30 or something, looks at pornography, admits it to at least once in the past month, sometimes more than that. And a higher percentage of women are looking at pornography now than ever before. These are things that we need to rein in our own lives, to reject, to the extent that we love women and want to protect women. We need to fight against pornography. Human trafficking. Joseph of the Old Testament was literally betrayed by his brothers and sold as a slave. That was like human trafficking. Their own brother, half-brother. And yet, Joseph takes on that sort of responsibility. That's that way of living. Someone that we can pray to end all these scourges. The more that I think about it, and the more that you can think about it too, put in today's problem, X, whatever it is, and then I find something like with St. Joseph directly deals with it. He's the saint of our times. He's the hope of our times. Another author reminds us, St. Joseph is a patron for many categories of people. So not just things, but also people. A model for heads of households, educators, and virgins. He's the hope of the sick, the poor, the dying, and the souls in purgatory. We know, of course, St. Joseph is the patron saint of the dying. Why? Because he died in the most beautiful way, in the hands of Jesus and Mary. This is our life too. We're all going to die one day. And if nothing that I just said touches you, we're all going to die. We need St. Joseph to help us. We have to invoke him at some point in our life, particularly in our deathbed. He's protector of workers, of travelers and pilgrims, of displaced or persecuted people who find themselves in an inextricable or apparently hopeless situations. And of course, again, with issues of immigration or travel, people who are in dire straits or hopeless. And how do we reach out to them? How do we help them or help the homeless? St. Joseph provides answers for us. And those answers, they'll come hopefully when we all start talking like, okay, well, we understand these problems, how do we deal with it? To me, it's kind of like, how do you discern things? Well, if you can do something, then you should do something. So what are those things that I can do? Like, okay, so like, here's my confession. The other day, over the weekend, myself, my community, went to New York City to go to this other Franciscan community called the CFRs. Much more famous. They get on TV shows, founded by Father Benedict Show, lots of book deals and music deals. I know nothing of that. That's okay. Not jealous. So anyway, we went and we celebrated the feast of St. Francis. And there were like 10 of us, and there's like 110 of them, CFRs. And what do? We're talking. Okay. And yes, I mean, in my pride and arrogance, I said, I challenged the F.P.Os versus the CFRs in soccer. Okay. The novices, not all of them. And I said, if we win, we get to stay for a week. But if we lose, we have to go back tonight. Well, guess who's here today? So anyway, so we're coming back from soccer, and there's like 20 of us. And we're in New York City, in the Bronx. And what do we see? You see someone who's on the ground like this, like drugged out, shaking, African American, on the street corner. And what happens? 20 Franciscan friars walk right by. That's what happened. And I was wondering, what are we doing? Well, it was the feast of St. Francis. We're coming back from soccer. We have to take a shower. Judgment Day, that man's face was the face of Christ. And as we're crossing the street, and one friar is saying, are you going to do something about that? And we're like, well, he's drugged out. We can't do anything about that. To the extent that we want to inconvenience ourselves, that's the extent that the gospel was preached and lived out. Or we can simply walk by. We need to plan ahead of time. How am I going to deal with that in the future if I can't deal with it now? Of course, I have no money. I'm not even my friar outfit, so I can get away with it because I don't look like a priest. And I can ignore someone. But, so then after so two friars walk by after like half everyone else has gone by, and they say, well, there's two people next to him. Does he need help and stuff like that? Oh, he's okay. He's okay. It's like, well, who are you to say he's okay? And then after in the end, we kind of didn't do anything. We just said, I don't know. What should we do? We're going to figure it out. It affects all of us. Coming up here, I don't have any answers. I'm just saying, we need to repent of things that we've done wrong and then figure it out. We need to pray ahead of time. And as family men, you have to talk to your wives and families and how you discern all these things. And what's the plan? I mean, in the past, I see someone who's homeless or wants something to eat, and sometimes I have an extra card for Subway or Dunkin' Donuts and stuff like that. I say, can I get you lunch or something? But here's someone who was totally drugged out, and it was just yeah, I guess if I had a cell phone, I would have called for an ambulance or something. I guess that would have been the only thing that any of us probably would have done at that point. But it's just yeah, but he needs an ambulance. Is anyone calling that? No one wants to even do that. Because we're in the streets of New York, and no one cares. And so, but if I thought about that and just said, what would Jesus do? Or what would Mary do? What would Joseph do? I'd have had an answer. Maybe I just needed to go to the person and talk to him or something and see if it was any way responsive or not. But that's just the reality of life. I mean, I couldn't think of anything more ironic than that. 20 Franciscan friars walking by someone who was homeless on the feast of St. Francis, and for the most part, really didn't do anything. And that means we're all sinners. It means we're all in the same boat. We have to repent and get on with our lives and do something better. We need to pray. What about the refugees or the immigrants? And my own prayer, St. Joseph Anna prayer of silence, of contemplation. we can't go further in our lives without having a deep relationship with Jesus. And we need St. Joseph to help guide us, to help perfect that life in ourselves. He's the master of silence, the master of prayer. And we know that because he can respond immediately to what God is saying. Help this person out. Be an instrument of peace in the family. Do X. And sometimes, oh, that's just a thought. I'm going to dismiss that. But the reality is, when it comes, ask ourselves a question. If I can do something, I should do something. And sometimes I could do something immediate. Sometimes simply being present to someone, talking to someone, giving them our time, being present to that person in need helps us to help that other person. And I don't need a lot of money to give some of my time. I just need to be ready to give it. Again, to the extent that we want to inconvenience ourselves is the extent that the gospel comes true in today's world. So there we can look at St. Joseph as someone who can help us in today's world. I'm going to stop and answer their questions, and we'll have a little question and answer session. Then we'll expose Blessed Sacrament. I believe that's like the next thing. So we'll take a little break and we'll expose at 2:15. We can expose earlier at 2 o'clock if there's not a lot of questions. That way we can have some more time for confessions, and we'll figure out what the confessionals will be at. Questions or comments. I know lots of you had probably comments among yourselves at the lunch table. And if you want to throw stones at me, you can, because I'm a hypocrite. We can do that too. I could put on a big red nose or something and pretend I'm a clown, which is what I really am. And or we can break. Questions?
So in your first talk, you're talking about Joseph as being in the line of David as the next king. So there's two genealogies in the Gospels. One in Matthew, the other one is in Luke, I believe. And they're different. So who actually put the chain together and figured out that Joseph is from this line and he's the next king?
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a good question in regards to what are the two genealogies in Matthew and Luke. That's a question I just try to avoid. But now that we're talking about it, if we read carefully Matthew, we'll see. I have my own theory now, and the fact that it's being recorded, people are going to start, canceling Al Lemieux's site or something like that, and saying that this is nonsense. What Father Andrew is saying, never invite him back. But Matthew says things like, in Matthew chapter 1, Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah. And in the Gospel of Luke chapter 4, after the baptism, we have this other phrase, Joseph the son of Heli, the son of Mathat, the son of Levi. Now, in the Greek, what Matthew is actually saying is that so-and-so begot so-and-so. So-and-so is the father of so-and-so. The other one says so-and-so is the son of so-and-so. And basically, if you read that carefully or find it like a scripture scholar way out of it, is that Matthew is talking about physical, that the immediate father of Joseph, it says, Mathan, the father of Jacob, Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born. So Jacob here is the father of Joseph in Matthew. In Luke, the father of Joseph is Heli. Jesus, when he began his ministry, was about 30 years old, being the son, as was supposed, of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Mathat, the son of Levi. One possible solution is saying, well, Matthew gives Joseph's genealogy and Luke gives Mary's genealogy, because a lot of the Lucan passages are with Mary. Like the Magnificat, you see it's kind of Mary's relatives, her cousin Elizabeth and Zechariah and the birth of John the Baptist kind of covered the first couple of chapters. That's a possible solution. But then you say, well, no, the names are different. Now, between King David and the exile, the names are for the most part the same in both genealogies. Actually, that's not true either. But anyway, going back from, David to Abraham, they're the same. Luke goes back to Adam. Some scholars would say that Matthew is saying the father of is saying so-and-so begot, that physically begot someone else. So, whereas Luke says the son of, and basically an early, not a church father, but a commentator on scripture would make the argument that the legal father of Joseph was from Luke, Heli, or Eli, and that Heli was married to a woman, and he died, and he didn't have any children. So according to the Old Testament, like the Levirate law, Heli's brother has to marry his wife. And his brother was Jacob, and married his wife. And then Jacob physically gave birth to Joseph. So Jacob is the real father of Joseph, but Eli is really the legal father. That is, the father who has since passed away. And so Luke is following that line of Eli, and then Matthew is following the other line of Jacob. But in order for that to work, both Eli and Jacob have to be half-brothers themselves, otherwise it'd be the same lineage. What's that?
Do the Jews today continue a line, assuming that Joseph wasn't the end?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. I don't know. It's probably unlikely. I mean, I never thought of that. I haven't researched any of that.
But
that'd be quite a long line to continue.
Right, but a Jew today would know what tribe they're from.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult because our Jewish brothers and sisters have different degrees of how they follow and interpret the law, or, there's like Orthodox Jews, and then there's like Hasidic Jews, and then there's like, more liberal Jews and things like that.
Are Essenes still around?
Essenes? No. Yeah, it seems like that's an interesting question. Are the Essenes still around? No. They, it seems like somehow they disappeared after the first century. And
They became Christian, I would say.
right.
They didn't have any kids.
They didn't have any kids, so like they would have died out. But what John Bergsma says later in his book is that it's like, and all these things fit. It's like, wow, that's amazing. Remember, the Essenes were all celibate, and they thought themselves to be the temple, the living temple in their bodies, and they were doing a ritual meal of bread and wine every day, expecting the Messiah to come. So bingo, when the Messiah actually shows up, you have a whole group of people who are ready to become priests. And priesthood had celibacy from day one. Because not all of them, but we can imagine a good number of Essene monastics would have simply became Christians, saying, wow, and seeing all these things line up, and then be ready to go. Whereas the early apostles, like Peter and some others, were married and things like that, and probably had children. But we see that some of them, like John, was celibate, and St. Paul was celibate and things. So you kind of had this early mix of like celibate and non-celibate apostles and early evangelists and ministers of the church. But you would have seen like actually a great influx, it seems to me, that they would have became Christians. And so, and there would have been holdouts who said, oh no, he's not the Messiah, whatever. And others who simply either were destroyed by the Romans, because that's what they kept all, and that's what they kept all the Dead Sea Scrolls there, locked, hidden in the caves in the first place, because they were probably being invaded by someone, but remained in the community. And even if they survived, like, they probably would have died out because they weren't having children anyway. So those are all like, again, hypothetical. Where the essays.
So if I could get back to my original question, where I was going with that is that, so in Jesus' time, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, would they have known the lineage? Right? Because there is a passage where Jesus goes into his hometown and he's not welcomed, right? And he says, oh, isn't he just like the son of the carpenter?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes Joseph sound like he's inferior or has no importance at all.
Mm-hmm.
So would the people in power at the time know that Joseph was in the lineage and the heir or the next, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Would they know that?
Mm-hmm. It seems like that wasn't a question that they were dealing with, but I suppose if somebody researched it or something, there would have been something to back it up in the sense that Joseph went to the town of Bethlehem to be registered, so he went to the city of David to be registered, and so all those people who there would have been descendants of David in the first place, and so at least, again, there's some sort of tracking we can see that takes place, because for the census to occur, people had to go back to their town of origin. And so anyone going to Bethlehem at that time to be counted would have been of the house of David. And so those would have been legal records that people could obtain if they really wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
and say, well, maybe the Davidic line is somewhere over here. Whereas my argument would simply be, it would have been carried along at least privately from father to son. And that if someone wanted it, if Joseph said, I'm the true Davidic king, at least there was some actual written record that said that he was at least from the house of David. And that he, then he can, people's memories are much better back then, where they can remember a whole list of things and stuff like that.
The Toledos.
Yeah, to train them, you're right, exactly. And genealogies are very important for people in the ancient world, which is why they're recorded. Even though for us they just seem like this thing that we read every so often that just makes us go half asleep or something. But none of the genealogies, either of them, are completely accurate. Like if you go back and look at Chronicles, you find that there are gaps in both of them. So like Matthew's genealogy is a bit structured in such a way that everything points to David, where we have these sort of 14 generations between these different groups. And if you really count, there's like some gaps for there that people that he's not counting for whatever reason. And he kind of like makes it fit a certain theology that he's trying to emphasize, that this one who was born of Joseph and Mary over here, he's the Davidic king. And 14 spells out the number David in Hebrew, DVD, which we didn't have any vowels. So it's just kind of the other sort of theological reason with Luke's gospel is that Luke records the genealogy after the baptism, and so a spiritual way of looking at it is that in Luke's genealogy, it goes way back to the creation of the world, and it says Adam is the son of God. And so again, it's not the same begotten, like God is the father of Adam that we find in Matthew, but rather this sort of legal generic path that takes us right back to the creation. So with Luke, we kind of see more of a message for the Gentiles and for the whole world, that Jesus is not only the King of the Jews, but also here to redeem everyone. And that sort of redemption takes place after the baptism. Like, he's the anointed one, he's the Christ, and the skies open up and things like that. And so there's a spiritual way of looking at Luke's genealogy, why he goes back to the creation of the world. Question? Jim? Comment.
You gave some examples of how Joseph influenced Jesus in bringing him up. Jesus passed those traditions on to people converted to him. I can see that Father gave me that tradition of taking a piece of straw from the manger to Christmas script and keeping it I passed a piece, told them about Grandpa's tradition. And passed on to them a piece of straw, Christmas spread, for each of them every Christmas. Christmas Eve. And they're doing the same thing with their children. Even girls are giving thought to their husbands. Husbands are doing the same. I look at all of these people doing the same thing that I passed on, that I thought passed on. And they all have good things. Well, it's
That was beautiful.
a good illustration of this concept.
Right, exactly. Traditions that we have at home and ways that we can educate our children how those things are passed on. Like, getting the Christmas tree the day after Thanksgiving or something, or when you put it up or something like that. When someone decorates the house. It's just amazing when we think about it. And when the traditions don't happen, I see this in my brother's family, my nephews say, Dad, we did this last year, we're not doing it. Like that they remember, they're asking why we're not doing X. And so, I mean, my brothers are secularized, so they got this Christmas tradition